A seasoned survivalist named Derek Rowan took his infant daughter on a standard day hike through the Great Smoky Mountains and simply vanished. Despite a lifetime of wilderness expertise, he disappeared without a trace. For 5 long years, the forest gave up nothing. Meanwhile, his wife, Leona Rowan, waited. No word, no clue. Until one summer afternoon, when 2 geology students rappelled into a crevice and found something red that would shatter 5 years of silence. The bland motel artwork, a faded print of a fox on a rock, glared down at Leona Rowan like a silent accusation. The room, tucked just outside the Smoky Mountains National Park, was sterile and still. Beyond the window, the evening was shifting into a bruised purple dusk. It was October 17th, 2019, and it was 7:15 p.m., 15 minutes past the expected return time. In her marriage to Derek, a man of maps, prep lists, and calibrated compass bearings, 15 minutes was acceptable. 60 minutes was not. By 8:30 p.m., Leona's calm began to fracture. Not visibly, not yet, but inside, the practiced resilience of years spent trekking behind Derek was unspooling like unraveling a paracord. Derek Rowan wasn't a casual hiker. He was 37 years old, a wilderness instructor, and what some might call a wilderness purist. He moved through landscapes the way others move through libraries, with purpose, reverence, and a deep understanding of natural language. A broken twig, a rustled bush, a wind shift, Derek read it all. And more importantly, he had their 15-month-old daughter, Iris. Every fiber of his being would have calculated extra time for toddler delays, for nap time, for snack breaks, for the slow, wonder-filled joy of pointing out a caterpillar crawling up a mossy trunk. He would never risk darkness. At 9:00 p.m., Leona made the call. Her voice was clear as she explained to a ranger dispatcher at Great Smoky Mountains National Park that her husband and their baby were missing. She hadn't joined them that morning. Her job as a civil engineer had kept her in town. She had declined PTO. Now it felt like fate had mocked her. She gave them everything. Derek Rowan, 37. Iris Rowan, 15 months old. Gray Toyota 4Runner, still parked at the motel. Intended trail, a seldom used but marked route on the North Carolina side. The most tangible piece of information was the message Derek had sent that morning at 10:37 a.m., a text with a few photos and 2 short videos. In one, Derek's calm voice cooed about a raccoon in the underbrush. Iris gurgled in delight. But it was the selfie that became iconic. Derek grinning beneath a teal beanie, his face sunlit and confident. His sunglasses mirrored the overhead canopy and a slice of sky. Behind him, nestled snugly in a high-end, crimson baby carrier, was Iris's small hand clutching the strap, her head shaded by a floral bucket hat. They looked alive, strong, moving fast. The caption said, "Perfect weather. Mountains are generous today. Love you." That report landed on the desk of Ranger Elijah Merritt, a grizzled 58-year-old with 3 decades in the field. Merritt had seen it all, from Instagrammers needing rescue 200 yards from their car to professional climbers who vanished without explanation. But a seasoned survivalist with a baby? This wasn't ordinary. It wasn't even tragic. It was unthinkable. The search was immediate. In the Smokies, time was the enemy. As Merritt studied the family photo on his monitor, the red of the baby carrier burned in contrast against the pixelated green of the forest. He radioed in the alert. The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of calculated chaos. Helicopters buzzed. Ground teams, their gear bright as lures, fanned into the trees. The mountains fought back. They are steep, tangled, and deceptive. Trails turn to scrambles. Rhododendron thickets turn into walls. Ravines plunge without warning. Sound evaporates. No signs, not a dropped bottle, not a boot print, not even a diaper. Derek, with a baby in tow, should have left a trail, but there was nothing. By day 6, the operation had grown. Hundreds of volunteers, thousands of man-hours, square miles combed. Then came the first glimmer of something, a metallic object, uncovered by a retired engineer named Lewis Dalton. It was a brass compass, cracked and heavy, antique. The team latched on. Maybe Derek's gear failed. Maybe his phone died. Maybe he turned to an old family compass and it betrayed him. It was plausible, emotional. It gave them a reason. But a historian with the local Heritage Society dashed the hope. The compass was 80 to 100 years old, likely lost decades ago. Back to nothing. Weeks passed. The grid search shrank. The headlines cooled. The whisper networks warmed. People began to suggest Derek had vanished on purpose. A man that prepared, that experienced, with a child getting lost? No, they said. He meant to disappear. Leona, now drowning in silence, fought not just grief but public suspicion. She hired PIs, walked trails alone on weekends, not to find him but to find anything that said he had once passed through. A leaf with a baby food wrapper under it would have been a miracle. Years passed, 5 of them, and then came a speck of red, spotted from 40 feet above a rock fissure by 2 geology students on a grant assignment. And just like that, the story opened again. At the University of North Carolina, graduate students Camille Norris and Dylan Herrera were spending their summer mapping rock degradation in one of the most rugged, least traveled stretches of the Smokies. Their work required descending into tight cracks in the earth, probing places most people would never willingly go. It was Camille who noticed the anomaly first. Perched on a ledge 30 feet above a jagged ravine, she peered down to take a photo of the stone stratification below, and her eyes caught something red, something vivid. "Dylan," she called, adjusting her helmet light. "Look in that fissure. You see that color?" He climbed beside her, peering over the edge. "Could be trash," he muttered. "Or maybe a piece of gear someone dropped." "It's jammed in there," Camille said, "like really wedged. That's weird, right?" They debated whether to leave it. It was late, and they were losing light, but curiosity won. They rigged a quick anchor and rappelled down to a narrow, unstable ledge just wide enough to crouch on. What they saw wasn't trash. It was a child carrier backpack, the kind designed for serious hiking parents. Its bright red nylon looked almost defiant among the muted grays and greens of the ravine. Its black straps were frayed but intact. One of the buckles had a small sticker, a faded star. Dylan's eyebrows furrowed. This isn't the kind of thing people leave behind. Not unless something went really wrong. They started the arduous process of freeing it from the rock's tight grip. The carrier had clearly been jammed there with force likely by nature, not human hands. Once it was out, they noticed something else. It was heavy. Too heavy for just nylon and padding. Inside, damp but preserved, were the remains of a baby bottle, a children's book swollen with moisture, and a miniature sun hat. The mood shifted from intrigue to solemnity. They hauled the gear out with them, hiking back in silence. The next morning, they drove it straight to Spruce Rock Ranger Station. The man behind the desk was Ranger Merritt. He listened to their story without interrupting. As they placed the red pack on the counter, Merritt's eyes went wide, but he said nothing at first. Instead, he turned to his computer, pulled up the digital archive, and typed Rowan. And there it was. Derek's selfie. Red carrier. Teal beanie. Iris. Merritt turned to the students. "Where exactly did you find this?" he asked, his voice low. The cold case file was reopened that same day. The backpack was carefully sealed and transferred to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's Forensics Division in Knoxville. It was assigned to Dr. Ava Kendricks, a hybrid expert in both material degradation and forensic anthropology. Her lab was more like a high-tech archaeology site than a traditional crime unit. Inside, microscopes, controlled humidity chambers, and analytical lasers waited. Dr. Kendricks began her methodical analysis. Every thread, stain, and patch of stitching was examined. The goal wasn't just to confirm what the object was, but where it had been, and for how long. The first surprise came during UV degradation testing. The red of the nylon was too intact. If it had been exposed to 5 years of mountain sunlight, it would have faded to a dull pink. but this pack still retained too much of its original color. Next came the tensile strength tests. The shoulder straps and waist padding were firm and springy, not brittle, not degraded by freeze-thaw cycles. Even the foam inside the buckles had held its structure. Dr. Kendricks concluded what Merritt had feared but hadn't dared say aloud. The carrier hadn't been in that rock crevice for 5 years, at most a few months. So where had it been? The evidence pointed to a place that was dry, dark, and temperature stable. Perhaps a rock shelter or natural cave. The carrier hadn't degraded because it had been protected, hidden. And the floodwaters from the March storm just 4 months earlier had likely dislodged it. That storm had dropped over 8 inches of rain in just 3 hours. Trails washed out, creeks became rivers. Boulders shifted. Entire trees were carried downstream. It all fit. The pack hadn't been dropped. It had been transported by water, over rocks, through debris before finally being wedged into the granite fissure where Camille and Dylan had found it. Dr. Kendricks's report upended the investigation. The timeline was broken. The red carrier wasn't just an artifact. It was evidence of movement. And now, instead of searching where Derek and Iris disappeared from, they had to search where the flood had started. Ranger Merritt contacted the park's hydrology and geology departments. Specialists were called in, topographic maps were laid out beside rainfall models and LiDAR imaging. They had to think like water. Where did it begin? Hours turned into days, running simulations that mapped the probable course of the floodwater, accounting for slope angle, rock formations, water velocity, and weight of the backpack. Eventually, one consistent origin point emerged. A narrow, isolated drainage basin. Mourner's Hollow, a jagged gash in the land, rarely visited. Avoided by hikers due to the sheer difficulty of its terrain. It had been just outside the original search grid back in 2019. It had been dismissed as too remote, too unlikely. But now, it was the most likely point of origin. Ranger Merritt stared at the map. "This is where they were," he said, and then, almost to himself, "This is where it all ended, or maybe began." Mourner's Hollow was unforgiving. No formal trails, no access roads, no cell signal. Just a deep, clawed-out basin of steep ravines, moss-covered rocks, and forests thick with laurel and shadow. On park maps, the area looked like a knotted scar in the land. To hikers, it was simply impassable. But now, it was the epicenter of a reopened mystery. Ranger Merritt assembled a special team. This wasn't going to be a mass search like in 2019. It had to be focused, surgical. He handpicked 5 of the park's most experienced personnel: a paramedic trained in high-angle rescue, a cartography specialist, a geologist familiar with subterranean features, and 2 of the Smokies' most seasoned backcountry rangers, Ranger Leo Mackey and Ranger Taryn Elwell. They were equipped with satellite LiDAR overlays, waterproof gear, emergency medical kits, climbing equipment, and 2 full days of rations. Their objective, to follow the projected flood path upstream until they reached whatever cave, ledge, or hollow had protected the red carrier for nearly 5 years. "Think like a survivor," Merritt instructed. "You've broken something. You're bleeding. You've got a toddler. You need cover, water, and time. Where do you go?" They began at sunrise. The route in was brutal. Tangled rhododendrons clawed at their clothes. Moss-slick boulders shifted underfoot. Their progress was measured in feet, not miles. They worked within the narrow channel where the flood would have raced through just months earlier. The simulation data suggested the carrier had come from a higher elevation, likely from a rock shelter or hidden crevice above the flow line. Hours passed. They checked overhangs, searched ledges, and climbed ridgelines. Nothing. By the end of the second day, their bodies were sore, their packs heavier with fatigue. Then, just before dusk, Leo Mackey spotted something odd. A tangle of roots clung to the base of a granite cliff. Behind it, nearly invisible, was a dark slit in the stone no more than 4 feet high. He called for the others. Taryn pushed aside the roots with her gloves, revealing a small rock shelf about 6 feet above the basin floor. She scrambled up, crouched low, and peered in. Her voice came out hollow. "It's dry in here." They all climbed up, one by one. Inside, the chamber widened, maybe 15 feet deep, cool, sheltered. There were no scorch marks, no signs of fire or cooking, but at the back, in a quiet recess, they saw what they had feared they might: bones, human remains. The skeleton was arranged with eerie order on its side, in a fetal position, with arms drawn in. Clothing remnants clung to the bones: a torn polyblend shirt, the aluminum frame of a hiking pack, and a disintegrated boot sole. The silence inside the shelter deepened. Merritt knelt, taking in the scene. He'd seen remains before, but this was different. There was something profoundly intimate about the way the body had been placed, as if he'd chosen the position curled up, not collapsed. The team's paramedic examined the leg bones and pelvis. "Massive fractures," she said. "Right side. High-impact trauma." He fell, hard. Above them, the cliff rose sheer and jagged. If Derek had fallen from the top, he would have been lucky to survive the impact. And yet he had made it here. With Iris, the red baby carrier had clearly been elsewhere. There was no trace of it here. No baby clothing, no toys, just the man. Dental records would confirm it later, but everyone already knew. The man in the shelter was Derek Rowan. It should have brought closure, but it didn't. Because Iris was still missing. And now, there was one more piece to the puzzle. Near the shelter's entrance, a forensic technician uncovered a tool buried in compacted dirt. Small, heavy, handmade. A digging implement. A rusted curved blade with a short wooden handle wrapped in an intricate pattern of faded yellow tape. Merritt stared at it for a long time. "I've seen this before," he said. The others looked at him. "Ginseng poachers," he added. The Smoky Mountains were full of secrets. One of the worst kept was the illegal harvesting of wild American ginseng. Worth hundreds of dollars per pound, ginseng brought poachers deep into the backcountry, often armed with nothing but a trowel and a good pair of boots. Some were old-timers. Others were families living off-grid. They moved like ghosts. And now it seemed one had been here. Merritt radioed in for a full forensic team, helicopter extraction, evidence collection. Because now, this wasn't just a shelter. It was a potential crime scene. And Derek Rowan hadn't been alone when he died. The discovery of the digging tool, rusted but unmistakable, shifted the investigation's momentum like a tectonic jolt. Merritt returned to Spruce Rock Ranger Station and spent hours digging through dusty archives, pulling up every poaching-related report from the last decade. Wild ginseng theft was an old problem in the Smokies, a quiet battle fought in the underbrush. Most offenders were careful and elusive. They left little trace, but occasionally one got sloppy. One citation stood out. 2017 October. Couple fined for illegal fire and suspected poaching near Twin Hollow Creek. The names are Denton and Raina Oglesby. Locals. Lived on the park's border in an unincorporated area of Sevier County. Merritt remembered them vaguely. Back then, the Rangers hadn't had enough to charge them with poaching, but the couple had been carrying odd tools, homemade and distinctive. In the citation photo, one of the tools had a short handle wrapped in the exact same yellow tape pattern as the one found in Derek's shelter. Merritt stared at the old photo. This wasn't just a match. It was the match. The Oglesbys had vanished from local radar in early 2020. Sold their house, no forwarding address, no digital footprint after that. It took the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation only a few days to trace them through a cash purchase of a trailer in rural North Carolina. A lead investigator from the TBI's cold case unit took over coordination. But what reignited the investigation in full force was a tip. A neighbor, who had no idea the Oglesbys were even under scrutiny, casually told an agent that Denton and Raina had been raising a girl about 6 now. Quiet kid, homeschooled. Bit of a shadow, she said. Sweet though, looks nothing like them. That was all it took. The team planned their approach carefully. A hard entry sirens. Warrants was too risky. If the girl was who they feared she might be, any trauma could compound the already devastating reality that she might soon face. Instead, a soft entry. Plainclothes agents. Calm demeanor. No weapons drawn. Ranger Merritt was asked to come along. His lined face, gentle eyes, and mountain-worn presence might offer familiarity, comfort. He agreed. They arrived at the Oglesby property just after noon on a Tuesday. A long dirt road, weather-worn mobile home. A wind chime made of utensils dangled from the porch. A single tricycle lay half buried in leaves near the edge of the yard. Merritt knocked. The door opened slowly. Raina stood there, thinner than in the photos, with sharp cheekbones and wary eyes. She recognized Merritt instantly. "We don't need any help," she said. Merritt didn't smile. He simply held up a sealed evidence bag. Inside was the hand-forged digging tool with the yellow-taped handle. Raina stared. Her face collapsed in slow motion like a stone bridge, realizing its foundation was gone. She turned and called for Denton. They let the team in without resistance. The girl, small, dark-haired, shy, peeked out from behind a curtain. The agents didn't speak to her. Not yet. In a quiet, trembling voice, Raina told the story. They had been in the basin, poaching as always. Ginseng prices were high that season. Denton had heard a child's cry, a real one, not imagined. They'd followed the sound. They found him, Derek, lying near the base of a granite slope, clearly injured. His leg twisted unnaturally. His face was pale. Next to him, swaddled in his coat, was a baby girl with wide, terrified eyes. He'd begged them. She begged them to take her. "She's all that matters," he'd said. "Please." Raina's voice cracked. "We should have called for help. We were scared. We didn't want to go to jail." They'd taken the baby, the red carrier, and a few supplies. They left Derek behind, alive but broken. They didn't even take the time to look back. They ran, drove away from the mountains that night, stopping only when they were 2 counties away. "We told ourselves we'd drop her off, leave her somewhere safe, but then we didn't." They renamed her, claimed her as their own, raised her off-grid. She'd never been enrolled in school, never seen a doctor. They taught her to plant seeds and catch frogs. They loved her, in their own fractured way. But that didn't erase what they'd done. Raina sobbed. Denton sat silent, staring at the floor. The girl was taken into protective custody. A cheek swab confirmed it days later. She was Iris Rowan. Ranger Merritt was the one who made the call to Caroline Rowan. He could barely speak. Caroline fell to her knees. Her daughter was alive, but she had no idea who her mother was. The confirmation that the little girl living under a false name in rural North Carolina was in fact Iris Rowan sent aftershocks through every corner of the investigation, but none more so than to Caroline herself. She had rehearsed the call for years, how it would feel if one day someone told her Iris had been found, but nothing could prepare her for the actual moment. The voice on the line was trembling. Ranger Merritt. He said the words, "We found her. Iris is alive." Then silence. Heavy. Total. It was as if her body couldn't decide whether to breathe or collapse. Merritt explained carefully what little he could about the Oglesbys, about their confession, about the forensic evidence, and the DNA test, about Iris. "She doesn't know who you are," he said gently. To her, Denton and Raina are. Mom and Dad. Caroline sat at her kitchen table for a long time after the call, the sun crawling across the floor in slow golden lines. Then she got in her car and began the drive to Asheville, where Iris had been taken into emergency foster care. The child had not cried when social services picked her up. She had asked where her parents were and been told they'd had to go away for a little while. She nodded. She hadn't spoken much since. The therapist assigned to her case was a trauma specialist named Dr. Elise Nayar. Her report noted that the child was developmentally normal, alert, and healthy, but emotionally frozen. "Iris exhibits no signs of distress," Dr. Nayar wrote, "but she also exhibits no signs of joy. Her emotional responses are muted, flat." The trauma hadn't come from violence or abuse. It had come from a quiet, deep dissonance. Her whole world was being rewritten. When Caroline arrived at the social services center, She was brought to a quiet, sunlit room with soft toys and cushioned chairs. Iris was sitting on the floor, drawing. She looked up when Caroline entered. No recognition, just those same wide, dark eyes. Caroline crouched, careful not to crowd her. "Hi, Iris," she said softly. "My name is Caroline. I'm someone who used to know you when you were a baby." Iris tilted her head. "You look like me," she said. Caroline couldn't help the tears that slipped down her cheeks. The reunification process was slow, carefully managed by Dr. Nayar and a team of specialists. They told Caroline not to expect a sudden embrace. Iris would need time, possibly years, to rewire her understanding of who she was. In the public eye, the case became a media sensation. News outlets ran headlines like "Lost and Found," "Baby girl missing for 5 years discovered alive." The red carrier backpack was displayed on every network. But the deeper story, the shelter, the poachers, the fractured family, was harder to compress into a digestible narrative. In private, the prosecution against Denton and Raina Oglesby moved forward. They were charged with multiple felonies, including custodial interference, child endangerment, and failure to report an emergency death. Their defense attorney made a curious argument. They didn't kidnap Iris. She was given to them. They saved her. The prosecutor, however, was unmoved. "They had choices," she said, "and they made the worst possible one." But there were no easy answers. The couple had clearly cared for Iris. They had not abused her. They had not tried to ransom her or exploit her. They had raised her illegally. But, with genuine emotion, Caroline was torn. On one hand, she hated them. Hated what they'd taken. What they'd allowed Derek to suffer alone. On the other, they had kept Iris alive. The judge eventually ordered a psychological evaluation for both Denton and Raina. It painted a portrait not of cold-blooded criminals, but of terrified people who made a morally disastrous decision and then spent years living inside its shadow. Back in Tennessee, Ranger Merritt returned to the shelter with a forensic crew. They scoured every inch again, looking for one final clue. Something to tie off the threads. What they found was unexpected. Near the back of the shelter, behind a loose slab of granite, they discovered a thin, rectangular object wrapped in a sealed plastic pouch. It was Derek's phone. The battery was long dead, but once charged and examined by a digital forensics lab, it yielded a final piece of the puzzle. A video, just over 2 minutes long. The file opened with Derek's face, haggard, pale, in pain. He was lying on his side in the shelter, cradling Iris against his chest. His voice was hoarse but steady. "If anyone finds this," he said, "please take care of her. Her name is Iris. She's 14 months. She's smart, and she loves birds." He smiled briefly. "Caroline, I love you. I'm sorry. I tried. I didn't want this to be the end." He paused. Then he looked down at the baby in his arms. "You're going to be okay, little bird. I promise." The video ended there. The phone, like the backpack, had been sealed from the elements. Derek had hidden it, hoping someone would one day find it. Someone did. And now, the story had come full circle. The video changed everything. It wasn't just evidence. It was a testimony of final words from a father who had died alone, trying to give his daughter one last chance at life. The district attorney's office revised the charges against Denton and Raina Oglesby. The narrative had shifted. Now, there was no longer ambiguity around intent. The video proved Derek had made a deliberate plea. His voice was calm, his language clear. He had entrusted them with his child. But the prosecution remained firm. Even if they hadn't kidnapped Iris in the traditional sense, their failure to report Derek's injuries and his death was not forgivable. At the trial's pre-hearing, Caroline chose to speak, not in anger, but in resolution. "They made a choice in fear," she told the court. "But that choice stole my family from me. My daughter grew up thinking strangers were her parents. My husband died alone in the woods, believing he'd done the right thing." Raina sat weeping silently as Caroline spoke. Denton kept his head down. Ultimately, the court accepted a plea deal. 10 years with parole eligibility after 4, contingent on psychological treatment and full cooperation with Iris's ongoing reunification plan. The public had mixed reactions. Some believed the Oglesbys deserved longer. Others saw them as tragic figures, victims of their own poor judgment and poverty. But for Caroline, it was never about punishment. It was about truth. And finally, after half a decade, she had it. The next challenge was the hardest of all: becoming a mother again. Iris had been placed with a foster family trained for high-conflict reunifications. Visits began as short, supervised sessions, then extended to longer weekends. Caroline brought familiar objects: photos, baby clothes, a small crocheted blanket that had once been Iris's favorite. At first, Iris was guarded. She didn't speak much. She drew pictures of birds and trees. She didn't like to be hugged. But slowly, the walls began to soften. Caroline never pushed. She let the moments come naturally. One Saturday, they sat outside on the foster family's porch. A hummingbird zipped past. Iris pointed at it, wide-eyed. "Daddy liked birds," she said quietly. Caroline nodded, holding back tears. He did. He really did. That night, Iris let Caroline tuck her in. Over the next few months, therapists and caseworkers observed steady progress. Iris's drawings grew more colorful. She started sleeping through the night. She asked questions first about Derek, then about what she was like as a baby. In one of the most unexpected moments, she asked about her middle name. "It's Mira," Caroline told her. "It means peace." Iris nodded solemnly. "I like that." By spring, Caroline was approved for full custody. Their first night back home together was quiet, familiar, strange. Iris wandered the small house, looking at things as if they were museum pieces. She stopped at a framed photo of herself as a baby, held in Derek's arms. "That's us," she said. Caroline knelt beside her. "Yes, baby, that's you. And that's your daddy." "He looks happy," she whispered. He was. They stood there together for a long time. The house slowly filled again, not just with objects, but with sound, laughter, music, quiet dinners, story time, the slow, careful weaving of a family reborn. Caroline took a leave from work. She dedicated every moment to rebuilding the bond, not trying to replace the 6 missing years, but to honor them, to move forward, not backward. And in the background, the park returned to silence. Derek's name was added to the memorial plaque at the ranger station, alongside others lost in the Smokies. The red baby carrier, now sealed in an archival box, was donated to the park's museum. Its exhibit is titled "Carried Through the Storm: A Story of Survival, Loss, and the Wild Heart of the Smokies." Visitors stopped and stared. Some cried, others moved on quickly, unwilling to dwell. But the park staff never forgot. Ranger Merritt, now nearing retirement, often sat near the exhibit, watching quietly. He'd lived the case. Every twist, every false lead, every gut instinct is proven right or wrong. When asked what stuck with him most, he never mentioned the backpack, or the tool, or the map overlays. He always said the same thing. The way Derek smiled in that last video, even knowing he wasn't going to make it, that kind of peace, that's rare. And that peace, he believed, had been passed on. To Iris, to Caroline, to the mountains. The seasons turned again. Summer faded into fall, the leaves in the Smokies catching fire in hues of gold, crimson, and rust. For Caroline and Iris, life settled into something resembling normalcy. Not the old normal, but a new kind, delicate, beautiful, and a little bit strange. Caroline had resumed part-time work as a landscape architect. Iris had started at a small private school known for its gentle integration of children with special emotional needs. The staff there knew her story, not all the details, but enough to understand her quietness, her occasional sudden fears, and the depth of her need for stability. She had friends now, real ones. A girl named Molly who shared her love for birds, a boy named Theo who sat with her at lunch and gave her pieces of his cookie. She was still hesitant to talk about before. She called the Oglesbys by their first names, not Mom or Dad, but she never said much more. Caroline didn't push. The therapist told her she will bring it up when her heart is ready. One Saturday, while sorting laundry, Caroline found one of Iris's school drawings tucked into a shirt sleeve. It showed a red backpack floating on a river beneath dark clouds. But inside the backpack, drawn in bright yellow crayon, was a small glowing sun. Hope in the middle of the storm. That night, Caroline asked if she wanted to talk about the picture. Iris simply nodded. "It was scary," she said, "but I think it was also safe. I don't remember much, but I think Daddy tried really hard to keep me safe." Caroline held her hand. "He did, sweetheart. He gave everything to protect you." There was a long pause. Then Iris whispered, "Did he know he was going to die?" Caroline nodded, her throat tight. "I think he did, but he wanted you to live more than anything." Iris didn't cry. She just leaned into Caroline's side and stayed there for a long, quiet time. In the months that followed, Caroline began to speak to schools and wilderness safety groups, not as a victim, but as an advocate. She told their story, edited gently to protect Iris, highlighting the gaps in search protocols, the importance of accurate hydrology mapping in rugged terrain, and the emotional aftermath of prolonged disappearances. She worked with the National Park Service to establish a new ranger protocol for remote area rescues. The Derek Rowan Initiative, as it came to be known, created training modules for using geological data and flood mapping in search and rescue missions. Ranger Merritt, now officially retired, volunteered to help lead the seminars. He and Caroline became close friends, bound by the strange, bittersweet threads of shared history. Together, they also helped launch a wilderness education scholarship in Derek's name for underprivileged students interested in environmental sciences. The scholarship's logo featured a red backpack with a small yellow sun peeking out of the top. Iris designed it herself. Meanwhile, back in North Carolina, the park rangers had kept their quiet watch. The shelter where Derek had died was officially closed to the public, its entrance sealed with a small, respectful plaque commemorating his bravery. Visitors to the park now received upgraded trail maps marked with emergency weather protocols, flash flood zones, and the locations of known rock shelters. Every so often, someone would leave a small offering at the site flowers, a note, or a child's drawing of the mountains. People remembered. And that memory mattered. One crisp October afternoon, Caroline and Iris returned to the Smokies. It was Iris's idea. "I want to see it," she said, "where we used to hike, where Daddy felt happiest." They didn't go all the way to Widow's Reach. That area was too remote and emotionally heavy, but they walked a lower trail near the old ranger station. The leaves crunched beneath their feet. Birds chirped in the trees above. Iris carried a small notebook, sketching as they walked. A deer, a squirrel, the distant shape of a hawk. They paused at a lookout point with a view of the ridgeline. "Do you think Daddy can see us?" Iris asked. Caroline wrapped her arm around her. "I think he's part of this place now, part of every tree, every stream. When we walk here, we walk with him." Iris didn't say anything, but she smiled. A real smile. It was the kind of moment Caroline had almost stopped hoping for proof that healing, however slow and uneven, was happening. That evening, they returned to their cabin and built a small fire. Iris toasted a marshmallow to near perfection, then held it up. "To Daddy," she said. Caroline clinked her stick to hers. "To Daddy." The fire popped, the stars came out, and the two of them sat together, wrapped in the quiet music of the mountains that had once taken everything from them and now, strangely, were giving something back. In the months following their return to the Smokies, Caroline and Iris entered what therapists sometimes called the integration phase. The past was no longer a shadow chasing them, but a part of their story, a thread in the fabric of who they were becoming. Iris began journaling, something suggested by her counselor. She wrote small stories about animals in the forest, about a backpack that traveled across rivers, and about a father who became a bird and watched over his family from the sky. Caroline read them all quietly, with tears that no longer came from grief alone but also from awe, at her daughter's resilience, her quiet imagination, and her will to understand the world on her own terms. Meanwhile, the media had not entirely let go. When the story of Iris's recovery and the unraveling of the mystery became public, interest surged again. There were interview requests, documentary inquiries, and even a true crime podcast producer who offered a significant sum for exclusive rights. Caroline declined all of them. This wasn't a story to be sold. It was a life to be lived. Instead, she agreed to a single piece, a feature in a wilderness magazine that focused not on the drama, but on the policy changes and the resilience of families who navigate loss in the backcountry. The article ran under the title, "After the Silence, What the Mountains Gave Back." Ranger Merritt contributed a section as well, highlighting the renewed training and technology now in use thanks to Derek's case. His words struck a powerful chord. Wilderness doesn't just take. Sometimes, if you're willing to listen, it gives back. But only if you keep looking. The article helped launch a second wave of funding for rural search and rescue training. Small park departments across Appalachia began using the Derek Rowan Initiative playbook. Derek's legacy was becoming not just personal but public. And in the middle of all of it, Iris had a birthday. 7 years old. It was a quiet celebration. A few friends, a homemade cake, and a small hike through a local nature preserve. Caroline gave her a gift that had taken months to prepare. A book, hand-bound, with a deep green cover and gold-embossed title, "The Girl Who Carried the Sun." Inside were all the drawings Iris had made, along with pages of her stories, transcribed and gently edited. The final page held a simple note from Caroline. "You are brave. You are loved. You are a story worth telling." Iris cried when she opened it. Happy tears. That night, Caroline found her asleep in bed, the book tucked under her arm. Outside the window, the stars shone cold and clear. The next season brought more change. Caroline decided it was time to move. Not far, just out of the small rental house and into something of their own. They found a modest cabin near the edge of town, with a fenced-in yard and a view of the hills. It needed work. The floors creaked, the paint peeled, but it felt like a beginning. Together, they painted the living room a soft sunflower yellow. Iris picked it. "It looks like hope," she said. The community rallied around them. Neighbors helped fix the fence. Her old colleagues sent housewarming gifts. Even Ranger Merritt showed up one Saturday with a toolbox and a thermos of coffee. They planted a small garden in the backyard with carrots, tomatoes, and wildflowers. Iris named the tallest sunflower Derek. Spring came, and with it, more light. There were setbacks too, bad dreams, quiet moments when Iris would go still and silent. The therapist helped Caroline recognize these as emotional echoes, not relapses, but memories resurfacing. They handled them together with patience and care. One morning, Iris asked a new kind of question. "What happens when people die?" Caroline hesitated. Then she answered the only way she could. "I don't know exactly, but I think they become part of everything. Part of the air, the trees, the light." Iris looked thoughtful. "Then Daddy's still here?" "Yes," Caroline whispered. "He always will be." Later that week, Iris painted a picture of a forest lit by sunlight and titled it, "The Light That Stays." Caroline framed it and hung it in the front hallway. It became the first thing people saw when they entered their home. As spring turned to summer, Caroline found herself returning to the mountains not just emotionally, but physically. She volunteered with the National Park Service to assist in educational programs for families, leading short hikes and nature literacy classes on weekends. Iris sometimes came along, helping the younger children identify bugs and leaves. Her quiet confidence grew with every trip. There were still moments like when a sudden thunderstorm rumbled overhead, but she faced them with a hand in Caroline's and eyes wide open. Caroline developed a reputation as a quiet but passionate advocate for backcountry safety. She helped design new trail signage for the park, contributing diagrams that clearly marked flash flood zones, safe shelters, and emergency contact protocols. Ranger Merritt called her the cartographer of calm. One day, Caroline received a package in the mail. It was from Dr. Ilara Vance, the forensic scientist who had examined the backpack. Inside was a thank you card and a small glass vial containing a preserved thread from the original carrier's red fabric. This was a witness, the note read, a silent one, but it spoke volumes. Caroline placed the vial on her bookshelf, next to a framed photo of Derek and Iris on a trail near the Blue Ridge. That summer, they returned once more to the edge of Widow's Reach, not to revisit the shelter, but to walk the ridge above it. Iris carried a camera now, documenting wildlife and rock formations. She had dreams of being a geologist. Like the people who found me, she said simply. Caroline smiled. Then we better start studying minerals. In town, their lives continued to rebuild. Iris played on a soccer team. Caroline joined a community garden. They hosted movie nights for Iris's classmates and quietly grew roots that wrapped around everything they had lost and everything they had found again. One evening, while sorting through a stack of old documents, Caroline found an unopened letter. It had been written by Derek months before his final hike, tucked into a folder of trail permits and maps. It began, "If you're reading this, I didn't make it back." Caroline sat down slowly, her hands trembling. The letter was not long, but it was filled with Derek's unmistakable voice, practical, loving, and hopeful. He wrote about risk, about the importance of nature in his life, and about how, if anything ever happened, he hoped it wouldn't sour Iris's connection to the wild. "She's meant to walk in it," he wrote. "She's meant to feel the sun through the trees and know it belongs to her." He ended the letter with a request. "Tell her I loved her. Tell her I choose her every day, even on the last one." Caroline folded the letter carefully and placed it in the front of Iris's storybook. Later, she would share it when the time felt right. As the anniversary of Derek's disappearance approached again, Caroline and Iris spent the day quietly. They made pancakes, walked to the library, and read under the same oak tree in the park they visited when Iris first came home. There was no ceremony, no candlelight vigil, just life. And sometimes, that was the greatest tribute. Iris brought home a science fair flyer from school. "My project," she said, "is going to be on erosion, like the granite cliffs." Caroline helped her gather books. They printed pictures, collected pebbles, and built a diorama showing how water could carve even the hardest stone. "Slowly," Iris said, "but it changes everything." Caroline kissed the top of her head. "Yes, just like you." 1 year after Iris's return, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park hosted a private dedication ceremony near a newly restored trail junction. It wasn't a grand affair, just a few rangers, local officials, and the families who had been affected by past search and rescue efforts. At the center stood a smooth, hand-carved stone with a small bronze plaque embedded in its face. The inscription read, "In memory of Derek Rowan, father, hiker, teacher. He walked these trails with love. May they always lead us home." Caroline stood beside Iris, who held a bouquet of wildflowers. They laid them at the base of the memorial, and for a moment, the wind died completely. Just stillness. Just breathe. The ranger leading the ceremony shared a few words, then invited anyone who wanted to speak. Most were quiet and moved. One older hiker recalled Derek's trail safety workshop. Another mentioned how he had once repaired a broken camp stove for a stranger. Caroline didn't speak publicly, but as the small group dispersed, she placed her hand on the stone and whispered, "You kept your promise. She's safe." That summer, Iris's science project on erosion won second place at the state level. She gave a small speech, thanking her mom and the rocks for teaching me patience. At home, the garden continued to bloom. The sunflower named Derek towered over the fence line now, a beacon of golden resilience. On the anniversary of their move into the cabin, Caroline and Iris hiked a new trail together, a short loop through a nearby cove filled with wild columbine. Iris wore a small backpack, carried her own snacks, and pointed out the birds she recognized. Caroline watched her daughter disappear briefly around a bend in the trail, then reappear with a wide grin. "Race you to the next marker." She ran ahead, light on her feet, laughter trailing behind her like music. Caroline followed, not running, just walking briskly, smiling. They reached the marker together, breathless. As they paused, Caroline looked out over the valley, the sun warm on her face. She thought of Derek, of the silence he had faced and the decisions he had made, of the red carrier tumbling through floodwaters, arriving not at an end, but a beginning. She thought of the Mayfairs not with hatred, but with a complicated forgiveness that time sometimes grants. They had made a terrible choice, but they had also given Iris love when the world might not have. And she thought of Iris, a girl born into mystery and shadow who now walked in sunlight, with open eyes and a steady heart. Later that evening, after dinner, Iris curled up next to her mother on the porch swing. "Do you think Daddy would be proud of me?" she asked. Caroline didn't hesitate. "I know he is." They sat in silence for a while, the stars beginning to shimmer. Iris tilted her head. "Can we go camping this fall? Like really camping? Tents and s'mores and everything?" Carolyn looked down at her daughter and nodded. "Yes," she said, "we can." They didn't need to reclaim the wilderness. It had never truly been lost. It had just been waiting. And now, they were ready.